That's why you always make sure that you have a pretty strong workbench, because this son of a bitch is heavy. Before we get started working on this bad boy, I kind of want to give a brief rundown as to what it is. This butcher block was made by Booz back in the early 1900s. It is 108 years old. Booz is a company that's been around for a long time, and they make butcher blocks and cutting boards and everything like that, and they do amazing work. So it's an absolute honor to be able to sit here and try to resurface and rework this thing. But the way that the customer acquired this was his great-grandfather got it from a butcher shop when the butcher shop closed, and it was passed down generation to generation until it got to him. Well, unfortunately, it's kind of unusable now because it's hollowed out from the amount of wear and tear on this thing, and the pores are really open, so it leaves a mess and it just looks rough. And he wants to put this in his house as a family heirloom and to continue using it as a butcher block. So our job is to refinish it. And what's cool is actually on the bottom of this thing, because this is the bottom, there's a number that says 8440. I don't know what that stands for or not, but somebody in the comments wants to do some digging on a Booz butcher block that says 8440. Let me know what it is. So the way that we're going to bring this thing back to life is making the bottom become the top. The reason why we're not going to leave the top as the top is because the top is so worn out from wear and tear, it is now cupped. And if we was to flatten that down to a parallel face, or to a flat face, we'd end up hitting these dowels. And these dowels are about 1 inch in diameter, and they run the entire width of the block. I'm afraid if we hit one, that this thing would just start to fall apart and crumble, and we do not want that to happen. So what we're going to do first is we're going to cut the legs off, and there's nails and staples in the bottom of this thing, so we're going to get all those pulled out and get the bottom prepped. And then so they turned this leg down, made a split notch, then drove a wedge in the bottom as they put the leg in. So as they drove the leg down, they drove that wedge in, widened that out, and that's what made the leg stick in the bottom. So after checking this thing with a straight edge, it's only about 1/8 inch out of being flat, front to back and side to side. And I know some smart ass out there may say, oh, well, that's not perfectly flat, or it's not parallel to the bottom. I get that, I understand. But at the end of the day, this is a butcher block. It's not a precision ground table. And we're going to keep that in mind, because I would rather sand this thing down with an orbital sander and it not be perfectly flat, instead of setting up a router sled and absolutely destroying this thing trying to get it perfectly flat. So we're going to get our sander out, start with probably 120 grit, because we don't want to start too aggressive, get some of this knocked down, and then we'll go from there. So the next step is going to be getting ready to actually pour tabletop epoxy on this thing. And the reason why I'm going to use tabletop epoxy instead of just leaving it like it is because there's so many open holes and cracks where the wood has expanded and contracted, and it's just been used. And I don't want the customer to have to worry about dirt getting in there if they're preparing meat on this thing, or liquids or anything like that, and damaging this thing any further. So we're going to use tabletop epoxy on this, pour a couple coats. We'll do a brush coat first to pre-seal all these things. Then we'll do another brush coat just to cover anything up, and then from there we'll actually go through and do a flood coat to get one last final leveling surface pour on this thing. Alright, so we've got 2 coats of tabletop epoxy on this thing, and it's looking phenomenal. The next step is going to be roughly sanding this thing using my orbital sander and 220 grit sandpaper. I'm going to scuff it up just a little bit to give it the next coat a nice mechanical bond, and then we'll seal all the holes where the legs were, and then after that we'll start getting the legs put on this thing, and that is going to be the pretty tough part. So now that all the epoxy work is done on the top of the block, it's time to actually get this thing flipped over and start making the frame for the legs. And I'll go into detail after I get this thing flipped over. Now that we got the thing flipped over, you can actually tell how grooved and just wore out this thing is. And it's not a bad thing, right? This thing has just seen years of use and wear and tear. So it's fine. My job is to fix it. So my plan is you're going to take a 2x6 and set that 2x6 right on the edge. And let this act as a leveling pad for our new legs. And then, with our legs, we'll take it and put dowels in the bottom and then dowel that into the 2x6. So it'll sit something like that. So that's our plan. Now let's see if it actually works. It ain't long, but it's girthy. And people say it ain't the size of the boat, it's the motion of the ocean. So let's see if it works. So with the power to be able to edit video, 3 best friends, this one to help you move some stuff, and a big helper, we were able to get the block outside and the legs put on. And the next step and the final step is going to be to actually case this thing out with 1/4-inch pine pre-sanded plywood, so that way the sides will match the legs, and this thing will be done. So let's get to work. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. So after about 10 hours worth of work, the butcher block is done. Turned out pretty awesome. I'm proud of it to be 108 years old. It was really cool to see some of the joinery that was used that long ago and just to see how long this thing lasted after that amount of time. But it was an absolute honor to be able to work on this. And if for some reason Boo's Block happens to see this, don't hate me for working on your stuff. And after that, and the help from a big helper, we will see you on the next one.